Welcome, Dadas all over Kenya and East Africa. We are so glad you can join us today. It's Sunday, it's 4 p.m. You're watching the Dadas show, a show about women, for women, topics about women and things that concern women. So today we want to talk about homeschooling. Now, if you are like me, you are probably surprised at the amount of work that teachers do. You are sitting at home, you sent your children to school, you paid the fees, you occasionally went for a day or two here and there, you looked at the report card and were rather surprised. Then COVID-19 happened and now you became a homeschooler, a homeschool teacher, and things happen and you are in shock. So today we want to talk about homeschooling. What does that look like? What is it? Because I think all of us were thrown into it and we have no idea what we are doing. So I want to welcome a good friend of mine, old friend, Karobia and Liz, and I'd like you to please introduce yourselves. So ladies first.
Sure.
Yeah, let's start with Liz. Ladies first, Karobia.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Liz Gitongo. What would you like to know about me?
I think we want to know a little bit about you. What do you do? Who are you? And in the concept of, in the space of homeschooling, what are you doing in that space?
Yeah. So, it's interesting that homeschooling is now a byword. But I have homeschooled for a number of years, and I am an educationist. And so what I do is, other than homeschooling my children, which I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that later on, I also support homeschoolers coming along who are looking for support in homeschooling, figuring out how do their children learn best, what resources do we use, how do we even figure out homeschooling. So I do that too. And I also am engaged in consultancy in early childhood development. So I would say I have a passion for children and their mental and intellectual growth. And so that's why I immerse myself.
Okay. We'll come to the homeschooling after Karobia. Karobia, how are you involved? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure.
And please tell Kenyan ladies, you know, how in God's green earth did you get into homeschooling, and what's your story with homeschooling?
Okay, for starters, my name is Karobia. Okay, my friends call me Karobia, but I have names: Arthur, Philip, son of Njogu. Okay, I'm married, Salome. We have 5 boys, and we've homeschooled them from when they were born. Okay, Njogu went to a play school for 2 months, but basically we homeschooled them all that time. I'm a believer. I love Jesus Christ. I think it's very important. That's a very core part of who I am, and just the biblical worldview shaping my life. Every aspect of my life has been infused and changed by that. That's a very core part of my identity. Homeschooling. I first heard the term homeschooling because there were some pastors. I think the pastors of Nairobi Lighthouse used to homeschool. And I had some friends, and they were Americans, and I had some friends working with some NGOs that came from America that were homeschooling. And then it came a bit closer. 20 years ago, I was working, I think I just finished working at a church, Nairobi Chapel. I was doing an internship program. And one of my peers, one of my friends, was studying or working in the US or Canada. So he sent an article. You know the way you just send an article to friends? And it was called The 7-Lesson School Teacher. And The 7-Lesson School Teacher is an article written by a man called John Taylor Gatto, an American teacher of long experience, 20 or 30 years, had won teaching awards. And in this thing, he just denigrates, undermines, and just unpacks what goes on in school. And he says, in this article, he talks about what is really taught in school. Yeah, it's not all the subjects. It is, you realize the subjects are disjointed from each other. You learn to look up to experts. You learn to have no confidence in and of yourself. You learn to rely on other people for your esteem. The subjects, all of them lasting 40 minutes or whatever, the bells, what does that do to the psyche of children? And just a bit of the history of schooling as a concept. And when you realize that schooling is not more than 100, even in the US, it's not more than 140 years old.
Formal schooling.
Institutional schooling. So now it's become such a big thing around the world, and you can't help thinking, what's going on here. So I found that article very interesting. And he champions homeschooling, which is, and the word schooling, I think it's more of home education or home-based education, a lot of it delivered by parents. And he says that, parents teach their children languages, discipline, manners. How is that not teaching? And because the average parent is educated, they can facilitate education, because it's not so much teaching. And my friend here will talk about education. Do you sit there and bank information into children as a kind of, it passes for some form of education, or do you facilitate learning? Like what happens in universities? Create an environment, and their teachers, their mentors. There is a space that children can pursue curiosity and self-instruct. I mean, there'll be mentors, there'll be teachers, but they can pursue. They can be motivated to learn. Actually, it's more of learning. So I thought I was very motivated, and I have always thought for myself, I like new ideas, especially if they work. And I wasn't married then. I started dating shortly after that. And, I met Wangoi. That was her name. She passed away 9 years ago. And we decided we will homeschool. When we start a family and get children, we said, this is something we'd like to do. And that's what we did. That's how I got into homeschool.
Okay. That's a really good... That's a really good reason to home. No, honestly speaking, but I'll come back to you. Liz, what's your journey with homeschooling? Because I know you are an educationalist. You are a career teacher in a classroom.
That's right. Yeah. And quite different from Karobia's in the sense that you kind of had a mind preparation to it. And I think for me it was really something I even fought at the beginning, because when we had our first child, and she was getting to that age. I think when your child is about 2, 3, 4 years old, you're beginning to look for preschool and so on. And having been a teacher, I knew exactly what education portends, the role that a teacher plays in the education of the children, and the influence they have. And even that curriculum matters. What you're teaching the children matters, because it's forming their worldview, how you're approaching the lessons. So I had a very good idea, my husband and I, we had a very good idea what kind of education we want for our kids. And when we began looking around, we realized that, and that was the days when 844 had a lot of positive things, but also was very, very heavy. And there's that kind of competitiveness that our culture has. Schools want to compete. They want to be the best. And often it's the children that suffer the brunt of that. Because a school to be the best, it means the children have to work over and above expectations. So as we're looking for a school for our daughter, that is what came out. They wanted that from a very young age. They would like to engage these children as much as possible, keep these children on for full days. By the time they're in class 1, have early Saturday morning classes, which are things that I'm glad that the Ministry of Education has now looked into and regulated, because a lot of children were suffering under that kind of strain. So that really discouraged us. And I had, my husband and I had decided when we get children that we will really, if the Lord allows it and we have enough resources, that I'll be able to stay home and take care of the children. And so now the school is saying, we want your child every afternoon. We want your child on Saturdays.
From morning to evening.
And yes.
And homework. And so basically you're a stay-at-home mom with no children.
Stay-at-home mom with no children. So why am I staying home again, And remember, this child is just like 3, 4 years old. It's not like an older child. Yeah. So, that really got me questioning, is this really it? Is this what it is, that my mothering job is pretty much done? Because now the school takes over, and that really disturbed us. And just around that time then, we got some friends again coming in from the US, great friends of ours, who are, the man has been my husband's mentor for years. And so we are talking about this journey that we are walking and how we are trying to figure out the right schools. And so she says, why don't you homeschool? And I think, what is that? Now, remember, I'm a trained teacher. I had even at that time, I think I was in the process of acquiring my master's degree and in education. And so this totally threw me off. What do you mean homeschool? And she says, teach at home. And I said, that's ridiculous. That's not the way children learn. Children learn in a classroom with 30 students where you're all doing the same thing. and there is competition, and there is teamwork. My only thing was I didn't want the competition to take over the child's life, but I thought that is the only way education can be delivered. And she said, no, you can actually get the same results and maybe even better by homeschooling. And so I really was very reluctant because I did not feel competent to homeschool despite being an educator. I was competent to teach children in a classroom, but not competent to teach my own children at home. That is a lie. But I soon discovered the lie because then at that point really I had no other choices. And I thought, we'll homeschool. I'll do it. I'll do it for just maybe a term, 2 terms, and maybe we'll have this thing figured out after some time. We'll get a school that suits what we want, and we'll move on. And my husband was totally on board, but I was the one who was reluctant. But thought, let me kind of try it out for a term or 2. But I realized that, hey, Liz, you can actually teach your child. You are designed to teach your child. You have what it takes to teach your child. Just like your child has learned how to read. Well, no, she hadn't learned how to read, but how to speak. The things that mothers teach their children from very young, and even their fathers. You can do it. Just take it in stride. Follow the developmental pattern of your child. Your child, in many cases, will prompt you when they're ready for the next step. And that's how we found ourselves homeschooling. So what had begun as let's do it for a term, for 2 terms, I began experiencing success. I began seeing her learning to read, which was my greatest nightmare. I didn't think I could teach her how to read. And year after year, then the question turned from, why should I homeschool? To, why should I send my child to school? There was more reason to teach her at home than to send her in school. And obviously then when her siblings came after that, we followed that same trajectory.
Karobia, I want to go back to a thought that you've sort of, you left hanging.
Sure.
I want to begin from the concept that school, what we know as school, operates within an entire worldview where parents go to work.
Yes.
It's critical. You see, if the parents, like she said, if the parents go to work, then school makes a lot of sense.
So
if the parent is at home, it's part of a societal organization. You see, that both parents go to work, and therefore a child is taken to a school and then picked up in the evening. And this is after the Second World War, during the war, and when the women had to now go to work, and
both parents had to go to.
Both parents had to go to work.
That's
so
right.
School was invented because men went to war and the women went to work. They worked. The history of schooling. So, somebody somewhere is sitting and saying, "You guys just sound romantic, because you can afford homeschooling." If I was to ask you, isn't homeschooling, the concept of homeschooling, a bit romantic? What would you say?
Well, there are different aspects to that. So maybe the question of economics. Okay. So that both parents don't need to work, because in the most examples of homeschooling, more than 95%, it is one parent who stays at home, and mainly the mother, the mother.
Yeah.
And so you have to live on one salary of the mzee, of the man. And I think many homeschoolers have made that choice. And it is not true that they all earn a lot of money, whatever a lot of money is. I don't know. I just find that, just like Liz was saying, when we got married with Wangui, she wanted to take care of her family. So when children start coming, she had worked before. She said, I want to focus on home, I want to build the home. So when the children start coming, you're nurturing them. Then they start getting to 1 year, 2 years, or they are doing blocks, you're singing to them, they're doing puzzles, they're part of Sunday school. Then they start learning to read, and you're like, oh, actually, they can learn to read. I can teach them to read. I'm already teaching them languages and everything else anyway. And because we'd already made that choice, there were questions we had angst about. Like, children are away from home for too long, for I think more than 3/4 of the time. And you think there are only 3 months of holidays, and out of those 3 months when you're at school, it's most of the day. And there is school time, then there's the logistics, and even in looking at the efficiency of that education. I went through public schooling. And in my primary school, I excelled. I was great. I slowed down over time after that. But I just realized we were uncomfortable. And if there was space for us to help bring up our children and teach them, we could do it. And then we learned we don't need to be teachers or trained teachers to teach our children. We can teach them to read their books, their libraries. We formed support groups with other people who are interested in this journey. So there are clubs. We realized we could. Now, in terms of society, now some people have like Gato has written and said that even though both parents went to the workplace, they didn't earn more. Somehow industry and business found a way of paying off less. So even though two people are working, it pays off less. It's just the human heart. It's deceitful, it's broken.
And then also I think that school is not cheap.
And school,
if you think about it,
yeah,
it's not really cheap. So
It's
if
not cheap.
one parent is working, they're probably spending all their money paying school fees anyway.
And
That's right.
when we went to school, when we were younger, I'm heading to my late 40s. There was a lot of public school.
Yes.
There
and
was
they were cheaper.
highly subsidized, more for, even though our parents had to fork out something like secondary,
Yes.
and it was still a pain, but manageable loans, cooperatives. Private school was much less. But in the last 20 years, private school has just become a business center and a core part of the economy. Now, it can be argued that we are a capitalist economy and new centers of production are needed, But it has also meant that many people can't afford it.
Yes.
Now, our public sector has been has lost its luster over time.
Yes.
When I look at the public schooling we went to, I visited my old primary
Yeah,
school,
did you go?
Umoja, the other day. It used to be Umoja 2.
Yeah.
Now called Unity. It's worse than it looked that time.
It is, but now I must tell you, because I know your former school,
Yes.
that school is actually has undergone a lot of renovation. I don't know if you saw that
This
there's
has been the last 2 years. Because I went there 3-4 years ago.
Oh yeah.
I took my children to tell them I went to Unity. Of
No,
course,
no,
now it's all
it's much
covered up
improved,
by
much
Umoja 2 and Umoja
Yes,
3.
yes, surrounded, literally.
Yeah, and I just thought, my goodness, the gates, the classes, I could see there are no window panes, the walls. I really felt bad. But that's a state of the public sector.
Therefore,
And my heart breaks.
Therefore, what you're trying to say is that the two parents going to work and then trying to get a good education for your child using the public school is actually not cheap. It's actually, you're probably spending all the money that you're making paying for school fees and the school transport and the books and everything else.
Because private school has become such an option. And many people, even like, let's say in the slums, a lot of the schools are private schools.
Yes.
So parents who are not making much have to pay for it. So they both have to work and you have to pay for this thing. And it's not cheap. And so then the quality, there's some good quality private schools that cost well. There's some that don't cost as much. I can't afford a private school. I can't afford a private school. So I would like to do to a public school. And the numbers are many. The hours are the same. You've got evening. I don't know. It's too burdensome. And I am grateful that our society and God has provided opportunities for those who want to pursue things like homeschooling to do it. And those parents that are willing to say, we will provide an alternative. So there'll be libraries, we have to buy books, we have to form clubs with other families that want to do this. My children today were doing exams. They're doing a system called classical conversation. And they're learning. And so I'm grateful for this
and
opportunity.
even just to jump in on that, because I know among your viewers, you have those single moms.
Yes.
Who are thinking, okay, so who is the mzee who is providing, But I think we're talking about choices. We're talking about prioritizing. And we're talking about looking at, this is my current situation. And this is a good product. Or this is a good idea. Homeschooling is a good idea. How can I access this with my reality that I am a single mom and I need to work. There's no one else who is going to provide the food for my children. And I think it first has to begin with recognizing some of those things that we are talking about. Karobia is alluding to, the quality of education you want for your child. What type of education do I want? What character do I want to see formed in my child? What kind of relationships Am I seeing him nurturing? And do I want to encourage? What values do we have as a family that I want to enforce? Now, once you have that kind of figured, and I'm sure every parent has the desires they have for their child, and then you say, okay, so how am I going to achieve it if homeschooling is one of the best options to be able to achieve this? Because obviously, you're talking about a parent working with their child daily. And I think many parents will be able to say in this COVID, well, it's not exactly lockdown, maybe partial lockdown season, parents, of course, have had to be a lot more engaged with the schoolwork of their children and even just having their children at home all the time. And I keep saying, I think one of the results we are going to see is character formation. They may not have done all the math they needed to have done or all the science, but their character will be formed. Because when you're at home with your child and have that expansive amount of time with your child, you will be training them as a way of life, because you're there to guide, you're there to talk, you're there to, pass on information, model what good living is. And so with those kind of values in mind and the desire to inculcate that kind of life for your child, then that single mom or single dad for that matter can then begin figuring, so how does this work for me when I need to go to work every day? And I do know a number of moms who are actually single parents and homeschooling very successfully their children. One of the ways that some have gone about it is even just coming together with other friends and saying, let's do a kind of a cooperative schooling so that you're able to help me with my kids, and maybe in the evenings I can also help with this and that, or Saturdays when I'm available, so that you're working as a cooperative rather than thinking I have to do this alone. Others will hire tutors. But you see, the whole idea is who is in charge of the direction that this child is taking. You are totally in charge. So when I hire a tutor and he's coming to my home, he knows exactly what he has come to deliver. And often it will be content. It will be academic, teach the physics, teach the math. And the other things, you end up having children growing even in responsibility. Because then you're saying, get the lunch going, or get this going, work with, maybe you have a house help to clean up these rooms. So you end up, as we are seeing in this season also, children taking up a lot more of the household duties. So I think it really begins with first just deciding, this is the choice, this is what I want. Yeah. And when you want it, where there is a will, there is a way. Because it doesn't have to be, you have to be there with a child 24/7. That's not practical for many people. So how then can we work around this to make that a reality?
Okay.
I want to just I was a beneficiary of cooperative schooling, where families come together because, like I said, my wife suddenly died 9 years ago. And two families that were homeschooling, that were friends, just said, what's your plan with the children? And I really just had prayed, I don't want to go to those. I would like to continue with this, but I didn't know how to do it. And you can't ask people because, people die. Now, you do life. And these two families came up and said, Karobia, as you figure your life out, let your children just come and join ours. And whatever our children are doing, yours will do. They offered. And for 1.5 years, Liz Gitongo here and her husband and another family, Harriet and Kimunya, would take my children at different times. And my children just continued a very uninterrupted fashion until I was able to get my footing and get some ideas. And I'm eternally grateful, and my boys are eternally grateful for those lifelong relationships that could support a brother who needed help in that sense.
We have to go into a break. When we come back, I want us to talk about COVID.
Okay.
And the fact that now most of us who have been quite aloof with our children's education have now been thrust into the miry
into the heat of the fire of what education, what teachers go through, an idea of what teachers go through.
We are now totally overwhelmed by the amount of work that goes into learning, and now we must make up our minds about what next. So we are going into a break. We'll be right back.
Great.
We are back and we're talking about homeschooling, and I'm here with Karobia and Liz. And Karobia, before we talk about COVID-19, you alluded to something very important. There was an article you read that said about, that kind of hinted about the effects of school, of corporate school, of what I call formal school, institutional school on children. Could you just share some of the things that were in that article? Which I think everybody, you should send to all of us. Let's all read it.
Yeah, all of you on Google. 7 lessons school teacher. Just Google that. Okay. It will bring up John Taylor Gatto. There are many articles. I've read most of them.
Okay.
But the 7 lesson school teacher, John Taylor Gatto.
Okay.
You read that.
Okay.
But he says the school is a very unnatural institution in humankind. There is nowhere, I think, there is no other institution where people stay at the same age with their peers for like 7, 8 or whatever number of years until you leave and go into the real world. There's nowhere like that. So I joined standard 1 with this bunch of kids, and they are my peers, and our class has 45 students or whatever they were in Rabai Road, and then there are 3 rows. Then we go standard 2, then standard 3. Because even the military is not like that. People don't join the military at the same age. You know, there is variances of age and ranks and
actually even sports teams are not like that.
And sports are not like that. You know, if you go take any team, I mean, everyone is not. So school is a very interesting institution. John says it's not called an institution for nothing. It's a joke. So that standardizing people to that level, the effects of that on the individual and in society, I don't even know whether it's really been unpacked. And then this continues, standard 1, standard 2, standard 8, form 1, form 2. Then you go to university, and university you have a bit of divergence. People have dropped out, people have come in. I mean, it happens a bit,
and
but
then
after
you have
that,
a bit of older people, and there's a mix.
Yeah, but after that, really, real life is older people. You're living with neighbors, you parents, and you know, all sorts of people. So it's unnatural in that sense. If you talk about, you know, you sit in class, teachers teach, you get your instructions, they guide, they determine when you go to the loo, you get permission for that. When you have a question, you put up your hand, you're given, you get to answer. He says we learn to depend on experts. And in the modern society, experts are useful. There are people who have studied certain fields to great degree and to provide solutions or to provide guidance. But take that to a logical conclusion. People depend on experts. There is much less individual thought, individual independent thought, or wandering off and just looking for a solution. No, we depend on experts. So experts become highly validated in that sense.
So we create a system where
we are dependent.
Where we are dependent.
Yeah,
and really, when you think about it, we create a sort of a system where many of us are taught to sit back and allow other people to lead us.
Yes.
Like sheep.
And to tell us what to do.
Tell us what to do.
Yeah, and then we do it.
When to go to the toilet.
Yeah.
When to go for a break.
It's madness.
It's really sad.
Yeah, it just denigrates the human potential, the image of God in us, to create, to think independently, to go off the beaten track. Why are you going off the beaten track? Stay on the track where all of us are. Now you see, you're a radical, you're a commie, you're all sorts of funny things.
Yes.
The other thing he says is subjects. Not subjects, lessons.
Yeah.
40 minutes.
The
40
content,
minutes,
like the content now.
The relevant, like,
yeah.
Not everyone understands the concept, finishes the project or the work within 40 minutes. Everyone learns at different paces. We are all very, very different. But we start at the same time, and whether you finished earlier or late, we finish at the same time.
Can I allow Liz to speak into that, because she was in class.
Oh, she's
and she was trying to tell me how that was just so overwhelming.
Absolutely. And I think when you get a well-meaning teacher, and I think a lot of teachers
Yeah.
are definitely well-meaning, and they want the best for their students. And I'm here in a classroom, and I think I must have had 35 to 40 children. I was teaching mathematics, business, and economics. And you realize not all children will learn and understand at the same pace. And I remember 2 students who really struggled. And unfortunately, the talk of the staff room when their names ever came up was,
blots.
Yeah. In fact, one teacher did say, I really like marking so-and-so's work, because that one is a 0. You know, it's easy to mark. And so now I happened to meet this young boy who was really just probably had a very poor foundation educationally, and really he's already zoned out because he knows he can't make it. So he wouldn't catch on with work. He would not do his assignments. But I thought, I'm going to give this boy a chance. I'm going to meet with him, and I'm going to mentor him, tutor him, work side by side with him. And that boy in the math class came from 0 to 10% to 20%. By the time we were done with the school year, he was scoring 50% in a subject that he knew he can never score. But that is because his foundation was different. He was understanding at a much different rate than everybody else. I would teach class, and then I would meet with him at break time and would go over the lesson again at his pace and in teaching it in the manner he understands. So that's true what you're saying. We don't all learn the same. There is an average, and definitely the teacher tries to hit at the average. But what happens to the outliers? What happens to the slower students?
The ones who catch faster?
Who are called slower, which I even don't agree with that term, because they're really just progressing at their rate. And then there are those who move on a lot faster than average. And what happens to them when they understood 5 minutes into the class?
Yes.
And I'm still aiming for the average student. So they become a distraction, they become naughty,
Bored.
They become totally bored, they lose interest. One guy was sharing his story going to university, and he would just get it like this. And he began writing papers for his colleagues, his fellow students, because they were very slow, and he already got it. So he writes papers for pay. So he writes and they pay him. And then he had so much money. What do you do with so much money when you're in university? Unfortunately, he went
You
into...
self-destruct.
Exactly. You self-destruct. And so he went into drugs, a poor young man, and got into some point of meaninglessness in life that eventually he tried to take his own life.
Wow.
And just by, God's grace, he did not succeed, but was in hospital for a very long time, and he's been well rehabilitated now. But you can see those discrepancies that happen in the classroom. And I think that is the frustration of the teacher. How do I teach that I can bring out the best in every student? And even just talking about the gifts and talents of students. What time in this day, when the student is leaving home at 5 and getting back at, late and having homework, what time do we have to bring out those God-given gifts and talents that the children have? The way that they will apply this lesson they learned in history is very different from the way somebody else will apply it. When do they get to discover for themselves the joy of education, the joy of all these lovely things that they're learning? And, even as we are talking of big self-directed, when will they get to open those atlases, those encyclopedias, go to Google and explore the wealth of knowledge out there? A teacher would be very wrong in thinking that they can teach everything to a child that the child needs to know. Someone put it this way, that education is not the filling of a bucket, it's the lighting of a fire. And if I light a fire in the life of a child, then for goodness sake, I need to give them time to fan that fire into flame. And that is the obstacle that homeschooling then is able to meet, because then we are able to provide that large platform for the child to explore and learn and apply themselves.
So your boys have been homeschooled throughout.
Basically, yes.
What would you say are the advantages? I think I'm now closing I'm closing the case for homeschooling.
There's a bunch. One, I think, back to individualized attention and instruction to the children, because all children learn differently at different paces. Because that's who they are. Some their brains are working faster, they get onto the task, finish, and want to move to something else. So if you finish whatever you need to be doing, you can move to something else. So every child is able to have their time. What are they working on? If they finish quickly, they can move on to the next. You are able to attend to them at that point. Yeah. It's just hard to do it for 45 students. It's just hard. It's just humanly difficult, if not impossible. So I think the homeschooling, home-based education allows the instructor, and mainly the parent, and the feeling and attention a parent will give
is very different.
It's very personal, so we are able to give individualized instruction to every child, then go at their pace. You're able to encourage them. You're able to pick up where people are slacking and being lazy. You're able to see where people are not expending themselves where they know they could, so you can push them. Advantages: home is also highly efficient. Can be a highly efficient place to deliver education.
It is.
Because there are no logistics of going. I meet.
There's no school bus.
7, 8-year-olds
I
at
know.
6 a.m.
I know.
At 6 a.m. when I was growing up, I was in bed. At 7, you wake up after breakfast. So of course it's become different. Population is huge. Schools haven't expanded as much. Schools are farther those days. Schools used to be next to home. So home can be a very efficient way of delivering education. So within the first few hours of the day, you finished what?
And very friendly as well.
Yes.
If you are hungry, you
The
just
kitchen
go
is
to the
just-
kitchen
yeah, get a
and you
fruit.
eat. You get a fruit.
That's
you eat
it.
what you have to eat
Yes.
and come back.
Now, other things that you can do home, you can do much more than the school is able to, more than the subject.
That's true.
Okay? Now, let's assume people are doing geography. Okay? So they can read the book like we used to read geography books. You can do DVDs. We're at home. There's a globe. You can attend to it. You can relate to the wall map. It's right there. And there are 5 boys. There are 5. Well, actually, one is just 4 months. So there are 3 who will need to. So the resources can be highly used very optimally by the children available. The spaces, if somebody wants to sit on the dining table or sit on the other desk, or so long as the work is getting done, and you are able then as parents to keep a tab on the other things, they'll be a part of the home life. If it is cooking, if it is chores, they become a part of. It's not something they are doing after coming from school and doing this. Things like libraries can be a part of this. They can be growing with other children. If it's the clubs and the support groups and the cooperatives that we do, that becomes part of the homeschool calendar. What are the other advantages?
Yeah, integration into society.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have access to life.
I have a few times I have had my boys just volunteer in the neighborhoods. One goes to the butchery, one goes to the grocery shop, and they just do 2 hours a week or 2 hours 3 times a week. Now they can't do that if they were going to school, and this system allows me to broaden their perspectives in that sense. They'll have more play. I remember PE when I was in standard 1, 2, and 3. PE used to be
The whole
we had 2
afternoon.
PEs
Yeah.
every day.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, and who remembers what was the high point of those skins? No one remembers that I got history right. It was a play, thieves and robbers with and police with the other boys and girls, But by standard 4, 5, PE became twice a week, and break time and lunch time. So now the children are able to play every day. They'll go out and play soccer and play badminton and do whatever else. I see them mokokoteni. They'll just be playing, and they are fully focused on the academics. For that's what we call them. Yeah.
Liz, you've put together an organization just to help, to get the homeschooling going. I wanted you to tell us a bit about it, and I know that you're doing some advocacy work with that as well.
That's right, yeah. It's called the Each Homeschool Foundation, and we have a team of trustees who hold this organization together. And the primary objective it was set out for was support home educators. Where are the areas they're needing support? Are they needing resources? Are they needing information? Are they needing to come together in weekly meetings just for interaction with families and children? And so just kind of supporting those efforts. And one of the big things we've done for the last, 10 years is having an annual conference. It has typically happened at the beginning of every year. And it's usually a 3-day conference, family conference, bring in speakers from across the world, lots of local speakers too, and have sessions for children, for teenagers, for parents. It's always very enriching. And homeschool families have always said this is how they like to start their year, to kind of refocus them, re-energize them, and get them going in their homeschooling for that year. Okay. But even as we look at what are the needs of homeschooling, in recent years we have seen clearly that we do need to get into advocacy work. And since we are set up to support homeschoolers, this is an area that we can see screaming. We need to inform, create awareness in the general public, among the policymakers. What is home education? What really happens behind the 4 walls of a home? Okay. If a child, your child goes to a shops and the first questions my kids will always be asked is, kwani hauko shule leo? Kwani hujavaa uniform, And sometimes, unfortunately, that has led to people then reporting those kind of families and saying that family, they're not taking their children to school. And of course, it then becomes also the thing to go for if my neighbor and I are not having good relations and they, want to have a go at me, that's the one thing they can be sure they can get me for. Just go and report, Liz doesn't take her children to school. Never mind, perhaps even the disagreement was that my tree is overhanging into her compound, but and we've seen that happen.
Or my cows ate their produce.
Or my cows ate their produce. And really, actually, I think, true, most of the cases we've seen against homeschoolers have been instigated by just other relational issues.
So what you're saying is, if I'm homeschooling, it's not actually allowed. Is that what you're saying?
The law is not clear on home education, because when when you read the Education Act, it talks a lot about education in an institution. When it says, rightly so, every child has a right to education, and that's a right that must be upheld. And obviously that's why we also recognize that and educate our children. Okay. But then it goes on to define education as that which happens in a school.
Oh, wow.
A government-recognized institution with government-certified teachers. So where does that leave the home educators? There's a whole then lack of sight of another whole way of educating children, which I must say at this point has also, by statistics, been proved to be very, very successful. Karobia and I can come and give our story and say, yes, our kids have gone on to succeed in life. But looking even at the data in Kenya of children who have been homeschooled and where they've ended up, we still haven't been a big community, but looking at that data and then also checking it against global data, we are seeing that we are going right in line with what the global data has for years said, that homeschooling is very successful. Homeschool students are doing very well. And actually, universities, Ivy League universities like Harvard, are actually now recognizing homeschoolers and saying those are the kind of students we want in our institutions because of the very things we are talking about.
Self-motivated learners, highly disciplined, very creative, very aware of themselves, very mature learners.
Not easily pulled into groupthink. They will assess situations for what they are.
Because they are not used to having to...
They're not used to which groupthink. It's mom and dad, there's a group. So just even as a natural product of homeschooling.
Much aware of their gifts and talents and knowing where they want to take those. As opposed to waiting to be told what to do.
Okay.
And I think that almost comes naturally, really. Just because that's a setting.
It does.
They're needing to make decisions for themselves. And so that's what we would like the government to recognize, that there is actually a very legitimate way of educating our children in our homes. And the association, the Each Foundation, is very happy to work along with the government in defining what are those parameters that govern homeschoolers? What are those stipulations that we would have in place, just so that when you see that child out there, you don't think that child is not receiving an education. You know that they are home educated, and this is their progression path.
And that there are many, not all children in Kenya. I don't know whether all children are going to school yet, like all. So
they say 98% of the children are now
so there's a
school.
2% that's not.
Those are the ones that we are looking for.
So the homeschoolers.
So those are the homeschoolers.
It's just to say that everybody, all hands are needed on deck to educate our children.
Absolutely.
And you don't want children out. And I think homeschoolers and home-based education is just one way of delivering education to the children.
And I think for special needs children, it really has...
Absolutely, special needs children.
The special needs children, how do you integrate a child who perhaps has autism, or, we have the school for the blind. Not very many schools are able to integrate blind students, handicapped kids. How do we reach these children? Or even with simple learning challenges like dyslexia, but which can forever ensure that the child is at the end of the class all the time. I've worked with lots of dyslexic kids, and it's always amazing to see the potential come out. All they needed was one-on-one. Someone who understands them, someone who can teach them the way they learn and help them excel. And some have, gone on to be even PhD holders. One child of my friend who was severely dyslexic is now on his PhD degree. So, it's those things like those, because the narrative in the classroom when you're always last, even if it's never spoken to you, is that you can't make it.
It follows you for life.
And it will follow you for life.
Those labels stick with you for life. And I used to find it unfair because sometimes I would excel just because I had a good memory. That didn't make me clever. But some people didn't have a good memory. They wouldn't remember facts, but they are great in sports. I can't kick a ball straight, or I'm not creative. So it's just unfair, and it shapes a child. It shapes the way they go, where they go, who they relate to, what they do with their lives, just because those special needs were not attended to. And they needed attention.
Or special giftings recognized.
It's a right of a child for that to be attended to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a society that doesn't, destroys that life. Yeah.
Okay, now that I can't end this without going back to COVID-19 and the fact that we are stuck with the children at home.
Yes.
What can we as parents do? You guys have got all the experience. Do you have any tips?
Wow. Yeah, COVID has kind of just thrown everything
Yeah.
in there.
Which is really good. Which is
Yeah.
really good.
I
I think
think
this
that-
is your moment to shine.
Yeah.
The homeschool.
And I think that's a blessing, just like through every darkness,
Yes.
there will be that silver lining.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think one of the things I would tell parents is, hey, breathe in, breathe out, relax. And I think parents, like everybody else, this was thrown at us. We didn't know what to expect, COVID. And so we are anxious. Is my child going to be left behind? What are we going to do? How do I keep them busy? And I've seen two extremes. I've seen parents go on overkill. And I think even to some extent, schools are really trying their best, but some are just like work. So the poor child is in front of a screen from 8 o'clock till 5 in the
Yes,
evening.
yes.
And one of the things we must recognize is that on-screen learning is not the same as being in a classroom. So already, even with the classroom being as efficient or inefficient in various ways, a classroom gives you breaks. You can walk out and go to the toilet, or the question can be directed to another child, and therefore, but on screen, you're needing to be attentive full time. The teacher is there's limited interaction, so a teacher will go on and on and on. And I've met these kids totally exhausted. At the end, have you had Zoom meetings during this time?
I have.
You do
I have.
3 Zoom meetings
They
and
are
you're
just exhausting.
You're exhausted.
They waste you. They
Isn't
just
it?
waste you.
And yet, on a regular day, you could have 3 face-to-face
Yeah,
meetings,
yeah.
and
You're
you're
walking
fine.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're walking back,
You're having
grab a-
coffee.
yeah.
You are,
And
you know,
you're
there's
energized by
there's
having people.
And there's body language that we are talking through, so we don't have to say everything. But on screen, I have to say everything. I have to ensure you understand. It's mentally exhausting. And so, so that's, I think I'm talking about a do not
overdo it.
Do not overdo it. And what is it that our children really must learn? Is there a danger that they'll forever not know math because we did not do 2 hours of maths every single day? You want to keep their math skills going, but can we do this in moderation so that your child also has time to just be? Now, we must remember they're also going through this with us, and they're hearing the messages we are hearing. When we hear, oh, the numbers are going up, or we hear, oh, no, now you can even pass it on by talking, or, all the different messages about COVID coming along, they're hearing them too. How are we helping them process? And not necessarily by giving them lectures, but just, hey, cut them some slack. Let them be. Let them have time to talk with their siblings. Let them have time to sit in their room and knit and draw, or whatever it is they like to do to relax. Let them have time to informally come and ask you questions. Mom, what is this? What is that? What does this mean? Will I see my friends again? If we don't create that space where they can really reflect on themselves, and beyond COVID, even on their talents, and just be able to apply themselves in the opportunities they have, we will end up having kids who are very wired and tight, who will be actually at the verge of breaking, and we won't realize it till it's too late. So, I think my first thing is
Slow
relax.
down on the pedal.
Slow down, slow down. Yeah.
Go easy.
Karobia, any tips for some of us who are still in the institution?
Well, more power to you. No, it's to say, let's take advantage of this season.
I agree.
Let's take advantage of this season. I think parents want the best for their children.
Absolutely.
And I don't always think that even schooling, because it's an option for many of us, but it's the working option for where we are. So I don't know whether we feel this is it, this is bliss, this is delivering for us 103%. So take advantage of this season. Okay, is it a break? Not a break from all learning. So Are there other things your children could be doing? So, first of all, be attentive to your children. First of all, see, they learn at school, you're at home or you're at work. Take time to find out how your children learn. Watch them. Try and get into their...
Psyche.
No. Psyche, but try and understand how are they learning. Try and get an idea of how do they perform in school. How do they do in school? Are they bringing that home? That gives you insight into your children. They're your children, okay? There may be moments you might realize either they're very attentive or they're very distracted. Maybe there are things you'll see that now make sense of the reports you get from school, good, bad, or neutral, you know? So time to engage about this same masomo. Don't be too removed. Try and make sense of what is it they are learning. Is this the same thing you thought they've been doing? Are you able to come alongside, even if it's just encouraging, mentoring, questioning, whatever that is? Do come out of this with a new sense of what they are doing in school. Take advantage of it, like I'm saying, of what else could be done in this season. We'll do masomos in the morning or up to 3. What else can they do? Maybe they need to just play more. Do you want more people helping you with chores? Are there other things they could do? Did you want them to learn something else? I'm an instrument. I don't know. But take this chance. Don't let this time go to waste. Use it for yourself with your children, and for your children. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. I'm told we've run out of time, so Lisa, I'll take your parting shot.
Okay.
Karobia, that was your parting shot.
Okay.
God bless you.
Hallelujah. Ever living?
Yeah, well, my parting shot is what I felt I must say, you know,
Yes.
because some parents are looking for a practical thing I can hold and deliver. Read with your children. I think that's the one thing every parent is able to do very easily without worry of where do I get resources. I found reading to be a very critical way to grow the language of our kids. And it's about giving them the tools for learning. If they listen to well-told stories, it's forming their language, it's forming their vocabulary. These are the same skills they'll apply when they attack their science or their geography or their physics.
Or composition.
Or composition for that matter. So get wonderful stories written by, classics. Let's read, not wimpy stories. Let's read the classics, Tom Sawyer, The River Between. Books that are very well written with very good language.
Things
Fall apart, that they can emulate. And let them talk about this. Let's have family conversations around what was happening at that time. Why did he say this? And you find that to be a very enriching and rewarding. It's like watching a movie together, only that this time, because we want to be very intentional about the language, we are going to read. And sometimes what you do is just take turns reading if children are able to read. Or let it be mom reading or dad reading. And don't make it too academic. Let's just enjoy the story. And you'll find that the language of the children will really grow.
So much to unpack.
And
there's always so little time in this show.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, Liz. Thank you, Karobia. It was nice seeing you
Thank you,
again.
Pauline.
Oh, lovely to connect with you.
Yeah.
The last time I called you, you were in a funeral.
Yes, my sister had died, but that's a story for another day. Thank you so much, Dadas, for watching. We are I am really, really challenged because for the longest time, I actually have put my own children through the institution of school. And I have seen how amazing it has been during the COVID-19 times, just to have my kids around me. We have had amazing family time. We've really bonded. I have sat down and, done algebra and read English and looked through the CRE and geography and SST, and I've had a really good time. So if you're at home, take advantage of COVID-19. You are the best teacher that your child would have.
Yes.
You are equipped for this job. God actually made you for this. Yeah. So until next week, Baraka.